Of Detroit, Kamala Harris just landed there. The warm-up act, as you can see looking out to Air Force Two, is the president of the United Auto Workers. And boy, has the enthusiasm for Kamala Harris and her new running mate only grown. It is the second campaign stop for Harris and her newly minted running mate, Tim Walz. A quick observation of their stump speeches, which we will hear in a few minutes, tells us exactly the kind of campaign they intend to run. There are two words you hear over and over and over.
Ours has to be a fight for the future and a fight for freedom.
Kamala Harris, she believes in the freedom to make your own choices.
We fight for a future where we defend our most fundamental freedoms.
Freedom and joy. With that, we welcome you to the fairest show on television, and we start there. Freedom and joy. The vice presidential seal's not on the podium yet. What freedom and joy means, nobody is sure. But that is the point. Because what America doesn't want to be free, and joy sounds pretty good too. It's very similar to Barack Obama's 2008 campaign of hope. Hope is good, but it really doesn't mean anything. It means kind of whatever you want. Once again, Kamala Harris's stump speech included precisely zero, as she spoke in Eau Claire, Wisconsin earlier, on how she would protect said freedoms, what policies would do that, and the policies do matter. Nor did she mention Joe Biden or her record as vice president. Just a month ago, Democrats said their problem wasn't talking about Biden's accomplishments enough. Now nothing. For those keeping score, as we take a look at her third rally in 2 days, it has been 17 days. And Kamala Harris has not had a single meaningful interaction with the media. Lots of interaction with the teleprompter. So now the rewrap, if you will, of Kamala Harris is complete. Just think about the transformation in 3 weeks. She has gone from an unpopular word salad vice president to the joyful defender of our freedoms. It is a remarkable transformation. And credit where credit is due to her campaign staff. She's had a lot of help from the media. We have seen that. We have reported on that. But just take a look at the split screen of the rallies today. J.D. Vance is following Harris and Tim Walz through the battleground states. This is from Wisconsin earlier. All right, look at the crowds. Vance talks about policy. Harris talks about freedom and joy. You can decide for yourself who has more enthusiasm. Chris Liza kicks us off tonight, journalist, senior advisor at the DGA Group. Good to see you.
Hello, my friend.
Keep watching and see when Kamala Harris takes the stage. I think it's Walz first before there's some speeches. The old joke during 2008 about hope was there was hopium.
Yep.
Remember, you got high a little bit on your own supply. How long does this high of freedom and joy last?
It's a really, really good question because, look, honeymoons in politics last, sometimes short, sometimes long. This is going on, like you said, 17 days. I think it lasts probably through this week because you've got this Tim Walz tour. They're going on the tour of all the swing states. And then we got a week. And there's the Democratic National Convention, which is just sort of a message fest, right? Republican convention.
There will be lots of freedom and joy.
Right. So I could see it lasting until Labor Day. I will tell you, I actually think that's why Donald Trump, earlier this week said, I'm only going to do this one debate. We're only going to do it on Fox. Then he was on Fox Today and he said, well, we're going to find a time to debate. He understands that he needs something to break this momentum. But I do think your media point is important. At some point here, I tweeted something out and said, it's been 2.5 weeks and Kamala Harris hasn't done a media interview or really taken any questions from the media. And people said, she's busy. It's like, I get that, right? Like she is building a campaign from scratch, but talking to the press is really important part of any campaign. And I would argue if the shoe was on the other foot and we had just swapped in a Republican nominee, suddenly with no primaries or voting, there would be plenty of Democrats who would say, why are they hiding? So a little bit of a double standard there.
Well, interestingly enough, of all people, Joe Biden has now done an interview before Kamala Harris has, which is interesting because he is no longer the nominee and she is. I want to get back, and I texted you this morning, does freedom and joy equal hope?
Yep.
And is that a fair comparison in that this is now a vibe election?
Totally.
And Kamala Harris is not being forced on any of the policy issues?
Yes. I don't think you hit it exactly right in your open, which is hope and change, right? What does that exactly mean? Well, it means different things to different people, but no one is like, you know what I'm against? Hope. Right? So it's so broad that you can put whatever you want into it. That's sort of why it's effective.
Is this, look, we've seen this massive change, right? From threat to democracy, threat to democracy, threat to democracy. And literally, they took that and went like this when Kamala Harris.
July 21st, the threat to democracy ended when Joe Biden dropped out of the race.
Right. No more threat to democracy. Now it is all about freedom.
Yep.
And this new chant, not going back,
yep.
which I believe we have to play. Take a listen.
Let's really fight to make sure that everybody gets a chance. And by the way, that everybody plays by the same rules. You don't have time to be cynical. Hope is a better choice.
That was 2014. He was still on that hope is a better choice.
Yep.
And it was still...
Go with what works.
It still worked. But the we're not going back chant, I'm sure we're going to hear it in Detroit today. Do they really want to make a comparison on economic issues, on national security issues, to Donald Trump's 4 years and Joe Biden's 4 years?
So remember, I think what you have to think about is a lot of times these are not policy-oriented arguments. These are chants that you say because Republicans represent retrograde, going backwards on rights, on equality, on those sorts of things. The Obama clip made me think of his famous line, D makes the car go forward, R makes the car go backward. Remember that? Like that was, it's the same message. The question for me is, the base loves Kamala Harris and Tim Walz? Okay. Part of that's because the base hates Donald Trump, and also because the base knew that Joe Biden was going to lose. So if we ran this coffee cup as a Democratic nominee, they'd be excited about.
Now they have a coffee cup, and now they're really excited.
Right. The question for me is, those people are going to be for whoever the Democratic nominee is anyway. Just like the people who are going to be for Trump are going to be for Trump no matter what he says, including if he shot someone on Fifth Avenue in his famous words. The issue is that those people don't decide the election. The people who are going to decide the election are people who are low information voters, undecideds. These are not all the same people, but it's a similar group. Centrists, swing voters. Does that message, we're not going back, does that work? In the same way, I'm skeptical that the weird message, which is at least part of why Tim Walz is the vice presidential nominee right now, because he came up with their weird and everybody latched onto that in the Democratic Party. Yes, liberals love that. But does the person who economically feels more pinched, doesn't love the situation at the southern border, doesn't maybe love that Kamala Harris is from San Francisco and is from the coast. Like, does that message work for them? Again, yes, it works for the base. Yes, Twitter loves it, but that's not the electorate you need.
Twitter's not real life. But the news, and I'm even going to now the network news broadcasts, that typically are the referees in this, in this game, right? Politics is a game. It's a full contact sport. There are a few rules out there, and there are referees. If the refs aren't calling the game, forget fairly, but aren't even calling the game, one side is roasted daily and made to answer some pretty tough questions. In fact, we'll put one up that was just asked about to J.D. Vance about being joyless and angry. Take a listen.
Well, I smile at a lot of things, including bogus questions from the media, man. Right now, I am angry about what Kamala Harris has done to this country and done to the American southern border.
The question was, you've been criticized for being a little too serious, a little angry sometimes. There absolutely appears to be no recognition by the media at all, and this is the pool media. This is who follows each presidential candidate and each vice presidential candidate around all day, every day. There seems to be no recognition that J.D. Vance is at least taking questions on a daily, sometimes hourly basis, and Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are not.
No, look, I think it is ridiculous to say because she is late to the game in terms of being the nominee, that therefore it's totally fine that she hasn't sat for a media interview. Or I repeat again, with the possible exception of the return of Evan Gershkovich, which she was there for, the Wall Street Journal reporter, she may have answered one question, but no one in that setting is going to say, "What's the deal with Pennsylvania?" You know what I mean? Like
well, not only she did answer one question, it was about midnight,
right?
And it was revert to the mean word salad. It was not the the Kamala Harris we see on the teleprompter. I want to get you to your very excellent Twitter account because you've been making this point over and over and over again. We'll put up the Electoral College forecast map of where really this election is decided. Toss-up states right now, 270 to win. This keeps changing, obviously, because of how the polling is now moving in Kamala Harris's favor. But if Trump wins Pennsylvania and Georgia in this map, Trump gets to 270. Pennsylvania and Georgia, that's it. Harris wins Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Arizona, meaning Nevada, Georgia, and Wisconsin all go to Trump. Harris wins. Again, Harris's map goes through Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, the blue wall. I'll pick up where Chris Steyerwalt talked, and there's no coincidence. They're in Detroit, right? They're not in Traverse City.
No,
they're not
in Marlboro, Connecticut, where I'm from.
Right,
right.
But they're not in Traverse City, Michigan. They're not in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Okay, they're not on the western side of Michigan, Benton Harbor or Holland, up in that way. They're not up on the Upper Peninsula. There is a group of voters in Michigan who are white rule men that if Kamala Harris is going to win, she's going to win. Does Tim Walz help because he's a white guy who wears a Carhartt jacket and can talk about hunting? Or does he hurt because he's a white guy who wears a Carhartt jacket and whose policies are out of touch with rural America?
So I think too soon right now to know, candidly, if I'm being honest. The one thing I will say is I did, and a bunch of other people did, sort of a deeper dive on Walz's performance in his 2022 re-election campaign in Minnesota. Now, Minnesota isn't Michigan. Minnesota isn't Wisconsin. I'm not trying to lump them all together. But in that race, he won.
I mean, as somebody who's been to all three a lot, okay, as I'm a Midwestern guy, there's a lot more similarity than our difference. Okay.
He got 52 and won by 7. Joe Biden in 2020 got 52 over Donald Trump and won by 7 in Minnesota. There's really no evidence that Tim Walz overperformed broadly in the state or particularly with blue-collar white men. Does that mean he can't help the ticket do that? No. But his most recent election, it's not. I think we always do this thing like, oh, he's the blue-collar white guy whisperer. I mean, let's see. Also, he's the vice presidential nominee, not the presidential nominee. People still mostly vote for the presidential nominee. I think we can't say that enough.
Look, okay, your outfit could not be more of the presidential politics whisperer. That is a presidential politics whisperer outfit. But I want to get you to Cori Bush.
Yes.
She is the pro-Hamas or Hamas-adjacent congresswoman, 1st Congressional District of Missouri. Apologies to my home state of Missouri, who lost after a very well-funded, also progressive candidate came in and was pro-Israel. And this is how she delivered her concession speech last night. Take a listen.
As much as I love my job, but all they did was radicalize me, and so now they be afraid. AIPAC, I'm coming to tear your kingdom down.
Okay. Tim Walz is a Kamala Harris pick to double down on and protect herself from that wing of the party. And yet the Cori Bush wing of the party is not where even the liberal 1st Congressional District of Missouri primary voters are.
No, you cannot. I mean, look, 2 Democratic incumbents in the House have lost this year. Jamal Bowman in New York and Cori Bush last night in Missouri. What do they both have in common? They're both members of the Squad. They were both very critical of Israel, and that's putting it mildly. And they're very, very liberal. Again, I just think it is a mistake to assume, well, look, you'd much rather have huge crowds like Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are getting in Eau Claire and in Detroit, right? Donald Trump loves crowd size. I don't know how indicative it is, but you'd rather have it than not. At the same time, speaking to the people who are going to be for whoever the nominee was is not going to be decisive in the election. We know this to be the case. There's very few candidates that either party will nominate where the base is like, no, not interested, particularly when Donald Trump is on the other side. So I just think that that's really important to mention. We're talking about people who are low information voters who do not follow this, who have no idea what
Tim Walz is. And by low information, we are not being, right. We are not being
dumb.
insulting.
No, not dumb. People who do other stuff. They're not you and I. They're not monitoring, or at least I'll speak for me. They're not me. They're not. I don't want to disparage you. They're not monitoring.
If I could only be as nerdy as you are, we got to run.
Yeah, I understand.
Back with the rally.
Good man.
Good to see you, my friend. The presidential whisperer right here.
There it is.
Map to 270 guy. Tim Walz talked about the time, all the time, about war. Part of his story, he even made it seem like he went into battle at times, but he never did. A soldier that served with him will clear up the charges of stolen valor. Donald Trump, as you just heard, has been phoning it in as Harris concludes her second rally of the day, is speaking to the converted a winning strategy.
This is a ticket that would want this country to go communist immediately, if not sooner. We want no security. We want no anything. He's very heavy into transgender. Anything transgender he thinks is great.
Guard. For 24 years, I proudly wore the uniform of this nation. And that service, just as it did for my dad, a Korean War veteran, and millions of others, I got the GI Bill and it gave me a shot at a college education.
All right, Tim Walz on the stump in Wisconsin earlier. We're waiting for him to take the stage in Michigan for his pretty standard stump speech. And much of the Tim Walz story revolves around his time in the National Guard. Talks about it, as you can see. It's true. But Walz now tells a very different story about his time in the Guard. Previously, over and over, he made it appear he served in combat when he did not.
I spent 25 years in the Army, and I hunt. And I gave the money back, and I'll tell you what I have been doing. I've been voting for common sense legislation that protects the Second Amendment, but we can do background checks. We can do CDC research. We can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states, and we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
That I carried in war. But Walz never went to war, not to Afghanistan and not to Iraq. In fact, he retired so he could run for Congress just months before his unit deployed to Iraq. He didn't go to war. Here's J.D. Vance today.
Well, you know what really bothers me about Tim Walz as a Marine who served his country in uniform? When the United States Marine Corps, when the United States of America asked me to go to Iraq to serve my country, I did it. I did what they asked me to do it, and I did it honorably, and I'm very proud of that service. When Tim Walz was asked by his country to go to Iraq, you know what he did? He dropped out of the Army and allowed his unit to go without him, a fact that he's been criticized for aggressively by a lot of the people that he served with.
All right, Sergeant Major Joseph Eustis served with Walz. In fact, the Harris campaign put out a statement by him. Joseph Eustis, 32-year veteran of the Guard who led the same battalion as Walz, said the governor fulfilled his duty. He was a great soldier. When he chose to leave, he had every right to leave. It's good to see you, sir. Thank you for being with us, Sergeant Major. It seems to me as there's two issues here. One is, did Walz retire knowing or having an idea that if he didn't retire and run for Congress at that moment, he was going to go to Iraq? Did you all know that you were probably going to Iraq when he put in his papers?
As far as I know, he did not know. The timeline is that he retired in May, and at that time, there were all kinds of rumors about us deploying, because that's what happens. There's rumors that you're going to deploy or you're going to go somewhere or whatever. In May, when he decided to retire, we had no, other than rumors, there was no NOS, which is the Notice of Deployment, which that didn't come until July of that year. And then there's and I don't remember the name of the third thing, but that came in August that told us where we were going.
Fair enough.
I did talk to him prior to his decision to retire, and he told me he was going to become a congressman, which I didn't think that was a great idea. But
why did you think it was a great idea?
Well, I think most of our politicians are in it for the wrong reasons, and I didn't think he would be a very good politician. His views matched mine quite a bit, and I know I wouldn't be a good politician. I'm not politically correct. I say some things sometimes without always thinking them completely through. So he decided he thought he could win. I said, oh, well, guess good luck. I have.
Look, fair enough. He retired, and I think you cleared this part up that you all didn't know. There's rumors, and Lord knows I work in a newsroom. There's a lot of rumors, so I understand that. The second question here is, I think, a little bit more poignant, which is that oftentimes, and there was that video actually that the Kamala Harris campaign put out, where he sure makes it sound like he was in combat, which is something that he never was in. And there's these accusations now, the line is stolen valor. There are men who were in combat. There are men who didn't come home. There are men who were wounded. And to say you were there when you weren't just isn't right. How do you come down on that?
Well, I hadn't heard that he had said that until today. Now, from my perspective, you should say you went if you didn't. You should say you used weapons in war when you did not. I do know that our politicians tend to say things that get embellished, or they embellish themselves. And, I think it is wrong to say you've done something that you didn't do. So if he said that and your video shows that, I would say that's very mischaracterization of what took place.
Yeah, you always have to be worried, and we always are when we see video about whether it's real these days, of course, or whether it's taken out of context or anything like that. It's telling that it was put out by the Kamala Harris campaign, I think because of his stance on gun control, right? He was using what was his experience in war to justify gun control. This has happened before, right? 20 years ago, there were Swift Boat Veterans for Truth. That was about John Kerry, who had talked about getting a Purple Heart. Here's one of their ads that perhaps ended Kerry's presidential ambitions. Take a listen.
I served with John Kerry.
I served with John Kerry.
John Kerry has not been honest about what happened in Vietnam.
He is lying about his record.
I know John Kerry is lying about his first Purple Heart because I treated him for that injury.
John Kerry lied to get his Bronze Star. I know. I was there. I saw what happened.
His account of what happened and what actually happened are the difference between night and day.
All right, Sergeant Major, is saying that you were in combat in the way that Tim Walz did as a politician, is that the equivalent to what John Kerry did, and is it disqualifying, maybe not for governor, but for vice president?
Well, that's a tough question.
That's what they pay me to do.
I'm sure you get paid well, too. I guess I don't think that you should portray yourself in a light that makes you something you weren't. And if that's what he's done, I guess I would say he shouldn't have said it. He shouldn't keep saying it. An untruth shouldn't be kept going, especially when it has to do with serving our country. So
well said by somebody who served it for an awfully long time. Sergeant Major, thank you. We appreciate hearing from you. It's notable that Tim Walz has significantly changed how he talks about his time in the National Guard now that there's so much more scrutiny. It's good to see you, sir. Thank you. Live pictures back to Detroit. The crowd there is awaiting the vice president and her running mate. The seal is on the podium. Where's Donald Trump as Tim Walz and Kamala Harris crisscross the country? Live pictures of Kamala Harris's rally in Detroit. It is her third in 2 days. Michael Walz will be there, and then Kamala Harris. She's on the road the rest of the week, ending up in Vegas. For Trump supporters watching, and we appreciate it, wondering why we aren't showing you a live picture of a Trump rally, that's because there are not any. In fact, other than a podcast interview on Monday, Trump is dark this week till Friday, where he rallies in Montana, not exactly a swing state. And then nothing else until an interview with Elon Musk on Monday. Again, no rallies. This morning, he called in to Fox and Friends.
We are going to drill, baby, drill. We're going to bring down the cost of energy. Energy is what caused the worst inflation, I think, in the history of our country. Food prices are up 50%, sometimes more. You look at bacon. Bacon is quadrupled. You can't order bacon. You can't order anything. We're living horribly.
And he did get me admittedly thinking about breakfast at Waffle House this morning and some bacon there. Another Waffle House aficionado, Mike Huckabee, is here, former Arkansas governor. I like my hash brown bowl covered and smothered, for those who are wondering. Governor, something else in your bio that I would add. You used to be a Baptist preacher. So I'll put this in those terms. Does preaching to the converted or the faithful grow the flock?
It might if the flock goes out and gathers new people to be in the flock. Look, I think it's natural that politicians certainly want to rev up their base, because if their base doesn't go vote for them, they don't win. You've got to do outreach beyond the base. That's always a part of politics. It's the math of addition, not subtraction, ideally multiplication. But you have to keep your troops rallied. If they're not excited, if they're not willing to march into hell with a water pistol, you're not going to win the election. So it's a balance.
Okay, fair enough. And you just said rally. That means rallies, which used to be, you remember 2016, you and I were there together at some of these rallies. They were every day. There were multiples every day. Now it's been a week. This happened today, and we don't really cover the horse race in the polling, because polling shows a lot of stuff, but an interesting thing happened today. Hasn't happened in almost 10 months. October 15th, 2023 was the last time a Democrat was ahead of Donald Trump. That was Joe Biden. Today, for the first time now, a Democrat is ahead of Donald Trump. That's Kamala Harris. She has the big mo. How do you practice addition from Mar-a-Lago?
I think you got to look back. Donald Trump has done multiple rallies all of this spring, all of this year. He'll be on the road doing rallies. I think there's a certain strategic vision of this where his team is saying, look, right now she is hot. She's got it going. The press has given her a daily tongue bath. They're falling all over themselves about Tim Walz. Let them have their time. And then it's going to be their convention. They'll get a bump from that, no doubt about it. And then they're going to have to get down to the lick log when it comes time for Labor Day and moving toward the election. That's when it's going to get serious. In the meantime, I think we're all waiting to see, does Kamala Harris have any policy positions? Does she have any intention to go on your show? Or for that matter, anybody's show? My gosh, she hadn't even been on Morning Joe. And I'll cut her some slack that most Republicans want. It's a smart political move, and I understand the strategy of it. Why answer questions when you're raising money and you're, riding this wave of enthusiasm? Because when she goes out and starts talking, it may not be as good for her. So, I understand what she's doing and why she's doing it, but she can't do it forever. And what I'm surprised by is that the media seemingly is just fine with not her saying anything for now 18 days.
Well, I'm not sure. You said something like lick log, which I've never heheard of, but I'm going to look up the definition of that. It's a Southern thing. I figured that. I'm Southern, but not that Southern. A lot to unpack there. And you're right. Politically, it is a brilliant strategy. It only works if the media at all is complicit. And if this was a Republican, we know it would not be. This is Tim Walz coming out. He'll give the warm-up act for Kamala Harris. We will listen intently in the control room and see if he makes any news or says anything perhaps about the stolen valor charges that we brought up. Interestingly enough, he dodged the question today coming off his plane. J.D. Vance is taking questions all the time, but still Kamala Harris is going up in the polls. What are Republicans going to do?
I think they're going to wait through the convention. This is not a time to panic. It is a time to raise money and to keep doing what they're doing, which is building the contrast and comparison between the two positions of these candidates. Kamala may not want to come out and admit what her positions are. Tim Walz probably doesn't either. But sooner or later, they got to own.
So you don't worry about
supported.
these poll numbers getting baked in?
No, I think right now, if they're getting 90% of positive coverage, and they are, and nobody's questioning the fact that they're not really giving any policy positions or talking about their record, sure, their numbers are going to go up. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, freedom and joy. That's what we started the show with. And we're going to actually ask about the policy positions coming up in the next segment. You have set us up perfectly as an esteemed broadcaster. Appreciate it, Governor. It's good to see you, sir.
Thanks, Leland. Take care. And go for the hash browns at Waffle House, always.
Yeah, always the hash browns. And always the bacon. We heard from Kamala Harris. Tim Walz give big shout-outs to freedom and joy. Tim Walz will say that here coming up in the speech. But does their definition of freedom gel with yours? They won't answer that question. We'll try to next.
And I coached the football team. We did win a state championship. I tell you that because don't ever close the yearbook is my pro tip to you. My students are the ones who...
At least last night, Tim Walz did not talk about being the faculty advisor to the LGBTQ club. We're going to keep listening to his speech, see if he comes up with anything new from the stump speech, mostly biographical so far. Tim Walz speaking now, Kamala Harris up shortly in Detroit, and they're riding the momentum wave. Big momentum wave. Conservative critics argue they're doing, well, absolutely their very best and doing it very well to dodge reporters and not talking about policy. It's a talking point that Trump's running mate is now latching on to.
And I think it's really disgraceful, both for Kamala Harris, but also for a lot of the American media that participates in this stuff, to have a person who's been the presumptive nominee of the Democrat Party for 17 days and refuses to take a single question from the American media.
Wisconsin today, Vance even walked over to Air Force Two from his plane. They were at the same airport. He brought reporters with them to say, hey, look, Kamala Harris isn't answering a single question. Quick browse of Harris-Walz campaign website shows they do not have a single policy position laid out just yet. Evidently, they didn't want to bring the ones over from the Biden-Harris campaign. And when you listen to their stump speech, as we have and will continue to do, you hear two words a lot: freedom and joy.
The freedom to vote, the freedom to be safe from gun violence, the freedom to breathe clean air and drink clean water, the freedom to love who you love openly and with pride, and the freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body.
Chris Hahn is joyful. He is also host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast, a NewsNation contributor, also a lover of freedom. Do you have any idea what any of those actually mean policy-wise?
Well, she just said the freedom to choose what a woman does with her body. That's a clear policy difference between her and the Republican camp.
No. That is an aspirational statement. You've written legislation. You cannot write in legislation a woman has a freedom to choose and put it on the House or Senate floor and give it to the president to sign.
You sure can ensure a woman's right to choose in our Constitution. You can do it right now. You should.
You can, but it requires to say up until what point? Is that a freedom to have birth control? Is that a freedom of up to 20 weeks? Is that a freedom? Hold on. Let me finish.
Okay.
Is that freedom up until the time of birth? We'll take voting rights, okay? Right now, you are free to vote in America. Does that mean you don't have to show voter ID? Does that mean you can't be asked if you're a United States citizen? Does that mean you can show up and vote as many times as you want? Of course I want specifics. That's what being president is about.
I got to cut you off here. You are asking for a level of specificity that Donald Trump in his 4 years in office never gave on anything. I'll give you a policy next Tuesday. She has been the nominee for 17 days. Give her a few weeks. There's going to be a convention in the Democratic Party. It will have a platform. By the way, it will have a platform that is detailed, not this pamphlet the Republicans handed out.
I'm sorry.
And Trump wants to walk away from the policy specifics of Project 2025.
I'm sorry.
Let's be very clear.
Could you please answer a question without invoking Donald Trump? You want to be better than Donald Trump? Be better. And yes, I'm asking for specifics. The DNC had a platform before Kamala Harris was the nominee. We've been told over and over again that Kamala Harris was proud of her record with Joe Biden and wanted to continue it. Why not just put up all those policies?
let's not remove the speck from her eye while ignoring the tree trunk sticking out of J.D. Vance and Donald Trump's eye. Right?
They're talking. They're taking questions.
This is, of course,
they're respecting the press.
From friendly reporters. We'll see what happens.
I guarantee you, MSNBC would love to have an interview with Kamala Harris right now.
I believe she will absolutely take questions. I would encourage her to do that. I believe people who are seeking public office should absolutely make themselves available to the press. I think it's important to our system, and I believe that they will. But ultimately, the policy stuff that they are saying right now is high level. They will get into detail because that's what Democrats do. And there will be some nitpicking over that detail, not just among the press, but among fellow Democrats about where they will go. That's how Democrats roll. They give specifics on their policies.
But in 90 days, they're not going to 90 days.
But 17
90 days, they're not going to roll that way.
You want her to write 14 white papers in 2 weeks. She's got to write white papers and pick a VP candidate and build a campaign organization.
Oh, come on.
Give her some time. Let her get into it.
Okay, first of all, if Donald Trump didn't talk to the press for 17 days, there would be a meltdown. If J.D. Vance didn't talk to the press for 17 days, there would be a meltdown. I would put it to you, and I would never accuse you of...
Calling it Fox and Friends is not talking to the press. I'm sorry.
Well,
it's not.
Okay, it is more than Kamala Harris is doing. But... I will grant you that. I don't think. Hold on.
How great
just
are
listen
you,
to me for a
Donald?
second.
How's your morning going?
I don't think you are giving. I don't think you're being. I don't think you're quite being honest because you were a political consultant at one point, and I guarantee you, if your candidate was having the ride that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz is having right now, and the press wasn't crowing about not talking to him, and you had a candidate in Kamala Harris who, when she gets off the teleprompter, doesn't work out so well, you'd never advise them to talk to the press.
Well, you didn't ask me that question, Leland. Of course I wouldn't advise them to do it. You asked me why she wasn't doing it. If you would have asked me that to begin with, I would have said, why would you talk to the press? She's rising in the polls. She's doing this. Instead, you throw this policy stuff at me and you make me say, why are you removing the speck from her eye when there's a tree trunk in the other guy's eye? I mean, that's just, I gotta go to the Bible every time. JC was right on that one, and we gotta heed it.
Going to the Bible with tree trunks. Okay. You never know where these segments are going to end up, but it's good to see you, my friend. Walz is on the stump right now.
That's what we strive for.
Thank you. All right. Walz is on the stump. We'll see if he gives us any specifics other than joy and freedom. Meantime, something you have not heard about, but you need to. Mass riots are consuming the United Kingdom. It's hooligans against Muslim immigrants. How Taylor Swift plays a wild role in this story. All right, Taylor Swift just canceled 3 concerts in Austria because of terror threats. The Austrians arrested 2 people, at least one pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. Terror threats, among other anti-immigrant grievances, led to mass riots and counter-riots by Muslims in the United Kingdom.
A petrol bomb and stones were thrown at police officers. In Birmingham, cars were smashed and a pub was damaged after protesters gathered following false rumours of a planned far-right demonstration.
You have to love the boringness with that was reported. It all started when a young man stabbed and killed 3 young girls. The internet quickly filled with false rumors that the killer was a Muslim immigrant. He is not. But in terms of the rioting, that hasn't mattered much.
But a sense of anger, I think you can hear there.
We decided to leave, but as we drove away, this man, armed with a knife, attempted to slash a tyre on one of our vans.
He's going to slap the tyres.
Niall Standage is here, White House columnist with our partners at The Hill, native to Belfast in Northern Ireland, where the protests have been erupting as well. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Sir, isn't this sort of what people have been talking about of mass migration, groups not assimilating, and sooner or later you're going to have conflict?
You could look at it that way. Migration into the United Kingdom has been above 100,000 for more than 20 years now, and that has clearly created tensions. In this case, though, I think it is the propagation of false information that has created tensions, as you noted in your introduction.
Yeah, no, look, there's a massive amount of gasoline sitting around, and somebody threw a match. That match happened to be false information, notwithstanding if it had been real or if there had been another another event that was real, could have had the same result. What we're seeing in these conflicts, though, is real. How does this end?
Well, actually, there is an optimistic note to sound here, because just this evening there have been a lot of demonstrations expected from right-wing groups that have not materialised, and a lot of British citizens presenting themselves to protect asylum centres and to push back on what they think is something being inflamed by the far right.
Okay, so the hooligans have not shown up, and there's sort of this middle ground. Where does the UK go from here? Is there a reckoning over this kind of violence, which we can all agree violence against immigrants is bad, violence against the locals is bad?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the question of immigration is now a mainstream issue in the UK. The Labour government, which was recently elected, was not an open borders kind of platform whatsoever. They are seeking to restrict immigration across the English Channel in particular. Again, Leland, I want to emphasise the perpetrator of the stabbing of the three young girls was not someone who had arrived by.
No, and the facts do matter. It didn't matter, though, in terms of the riots, correct?
Correct.
The time I've spent in the UK, there are places in Birmingham, there's places, and now I'm blanking, Liverpool, Manchester, others that I was told do not go in because of the sort of, and certainly don't go there with women, because of the Muslim population. It's little Islamabad. Is that still a problem?
I don't think that is a problem. I think that is exaggerated, honestly. I have never been in any no-go area or felt that I couldn't go anywhere in the United Kingdom.
Does the picture surprise you at all?
It surprises me that it has been quite as widespread as it has. There has been rioting or disorder in, I think, about 20 cities, including my native Belfast. It does surprise me that that has caught fire, literally, in the way that it has, but it does appear to be being curbed now. We should mention the British authorities speeding people through the courts to try to cause a deterrent.
Got it. Niall, thank you very much.
Good
we appreciate it. Kamala Harris on the stump, where immigration takes not even a back seat, now a front seat to a lot of her discussions about the border. We'll see you for day 18 of no interactions with the press, only the teleprompter tomorrow night.